If a 7-year-old child goes to the doctor, right, and their blood work comes back showing high systemic inflammation and poor blood sugar regulation.
Which is obviously terrifying for any parent.
Oh, absolutely. Your very first question as a parent or even as the doctor is probably going to be, what is this kid eating?
Right. Or, are they getting enough exercise?
Exactly, because we are so conditioned to look for immediate physical inputs to explain those physical symptoms.
We want a direct line from A to B.
We really do. But there's this groundbreaking new research that suggests you should actually be asking a completely different
A
question.
totally unexpected one.
Yeah, you should be asking, how did their dad play peekaboo with them when they were an infant?
Which just sounds absurd on the surface, I know.
It really does, but it represents this staggering pivot in how we view human health.
It does. Because, we are so used to the traditional medical paradigm. You break a bone, you look at the x-ray, you see the fracture.
Right, it's a one-to-one physical ratio.
Exactly. But when you step into the world of human development, those clear diagnostic lines really start to blur. Human biology doesn't exist in a vacuum.
No, it develops in an environment.
Yes, and for a young child, their most immediate, most impactful environment is the relationship between their parents.
Which brings us to the mission of today's deep dive. We have an incredibly illuminating source on the table today for you.
A really fantastic piece of writing.
It is. It's an article from Psychology Today by Dr. Rachel Diamond. And in it, she unpacks a recent, highly rigorous study that was published in the journal Health Psychology.
And it's a massive study.
Huge. So our goal for this deep dive is to explore this profound paradigm shift. We are looking at how the dynamics between parents, and specifically the father's role, go way beyond just having a psychological or emotional impact on a child.
Right, we're talking about tangible biology here.
Exactly. We are talking about how a father's early behavior actually alters a child's biological health at a cellular level.
I mean, for decades, the clinical and research focus has been overwhelmingly on the psychological effects of parenting.
Almost exclusively, really.
Yeah. So to cross the threshold into tangible long-term biological markers and to tie those markers specifically to the father's early interactions, it fundamentally rewrites our understanding of family medicine.
Okay, let's unpack this, because we need to address a pretty glaring blind spot in the way we usually talk about early childhood development.
Oh, the maternal blind spot.
Yes. Historically, the spotlight, the microscope, the entire cultural narrative has hyper-focused exclusively on mothers.
It's always about the mom.
Always.
Yeah.
The mother-child bond is treated as the alpha and omega of a child's well-being. So why are we shifting that massive spotlight over to dads today?
Well, Dr. Diamond tackles that bias directly in her article. As a couple and family therapist, she notes that mothers receive, well, almost all the attention in early development studies.
Often to the complete exclusion of fathers, right?
Exactly. And the problem with that approach is that it ignores the broader caregiving ecosystem. What's fascinating here is how this study uses a broad family systems lens to examine children's long-term health rather than just isolating one parent in a vacuum.
Rather than treating the mom like she's the only variable that matters.
Right, because that's just not how families work.
A family systems lens. You know, focusing solely on the mother for a child's health is kind of like trying to figure out how a car drives by only looking at the tires and completely ignoring the steering wheel and the engine.
That's a great way to look at it.
You can't just check the tire pressure and say, yep, the car's fine. The whole machine has to work together.
Right, and if you only study the tires, you are completely blind to the integrity of the whole vehicle.
Exactly.
So to get a true picture of that integrity, the researchers in this health psychology study designed an incredibly grueling, rigorous methodology.
Which is no small feat.
No, not at all. They followed nearly 300 families of first-time parents, specifically mother-father pairs, over the first 7 years of their child's life.
7 years. That is a massive undertaking for a longitudinal study.
Just a huge commitment.
Yeah, because you aren't just capturing a snapshot of a good day or a bad day.
Yeah.
You are capturing the sleep-deprived newborn phase, the absolute chaos of the toddler years.
The girl twos, yeah.
Right? And then the transition into kindergarten all the way up to middle childhood.
And that time frame is really the magic of this data. It allows researchers to track how early relational seeds grow into complex physiological vines.
So they're watching the whole plant grow, basically.
Exactly. They specifically measured early parent-child behaviors during infancy and then measured how the parents work together, the co-parenting dynamic, during the toddler years.
Okay.
And finally, they looked at the child's cardiometabolic health at age 7. They wanted to see if the social dynamics at year 1 and 2 physically manifested inside the child's body by year 7.
So we have these 300 families being heavily observed. But let's look at the actual mechanics of this. How exactly does a father's early behavior create this ripple effect?
It starts early, very early.
Right, because a newborn barely knows its own hands exist. How does a father's interaction in those early months dictate anything years down the line?
It starts with something that appears deceptively simple, honestly. It's just how fathers play with their infants.
Playtime.
Yeah, playtime is essentially the first language of connection. This study revealed a really clear behavioral sequence here.
What did they find?
Well, fathers who were responsive, engaged, and affectionate during play with their infants, meaning, they made eye contact, they matched the baby's vocalizations, they stayed
You weren't just staring at the wall.
Right. Those dads were significantly more likely to develop a cooperative co-parenting relationship with the mother by the time that infant became a toddler.
Wait, let me challenge that leap for a second. So if a dad is just a little distracted during a game of peekaboo, maybe, I don't know, checking his phone or just not being super animated with a 6-month-old, it somehow mutates into a full-blown turf war over the toddler later on.
It sounds extreme when you put it like that.
It does. The source mentions fathers who are less engaged fall into a competitive withdrawn co-parenting dynamic. What does competitive withdrawn actually look like in practice in the real world of raising a 2-year-old?
I mean, it does sound like a dramatic escalation, but the behavior patterns track really consistently. Competitive withdrawal manifests in 2 distinct ways when the parents are forced to navigate the high-stress toddler phase.
Okay, lay them out for me.
The first is the competitive aspect. This is where the parents are subtly or even overtly undermining each other.
Oh, like competing for the child's affection?
Exactly. One parent plays the strict enforcer, and the other plays the fun parent who breaks the rules behind their back.
Giving them the cookie before dinner.
Yes. They are essentially pitting themselves against their partner and using the child as the arena for that conflict.
So they are having a silent argument with each other, and the toddler is just caught in the crossfire.
Precisely. Now, the second manifestation is the withdrawn aspect.
What does that look like?
This is where the father just disengages from the parenting unit entirely. He steps back from discipline. He avoids the chaotic tantrums.
He just sort of checks out.
Yeah, and he essentially leaves the mother to function as a single parent within a 2-parent household.
To be fair to the dads out there, I can imagine a scenario where stepping back is actually a well-meaning, albeit totally misguided attempt to avoid conflict.
Oh, absolutely.
Like a father might think, we argue every time we try to put the kid to bed, so I'm just going to get out of the way. I'm lowering the temperature. They might genuinely believe they are helping by retreating.
And that is a very common psychological trap. The intent might be conflict avoidance. But we have to look at how the child's developing nervous system interprets that withdrawal.
How does the child see it?
For a toddler, a parent checking out emotionally or physically registers as a lack of safety. The caregiving foundation suddenly feels unstable.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so whether the parents are actively competing and undermining each other or the father has completely withdrawn, the underlying current in the household is one of tension and instability.
And that tension brings us to the core of this entire study, which is the leap from the psychological to the physiological.
The mind-body connection.
Yes. We have established this competitive withdrawn co-parenting dynamic. It is a stressful environment for everyone. But how does that relational issue translate into a physical health issue for a 7-year-old?
It's the most striking finding in the paper.
Because when you say cardiometabolic health, my mind immediately goes to things like childhood obesity or early signs of prediabetes. What specific physical markers did the researchers actually find?
The children of these competitive withdrawn fathers demonstrated 2 very specific physiological markers by age 7. They had higher systemic inflammation and poorer blood sugar regulation.
Inflammation and blood sugar. In a 7-year-old.
Yeah.
That is incredibly sobering because it implies that an argument over who gives the kid a bath is somehow getting under the child's skin and altering their cellular function.
It really is.
We need to explain the biology here. How does a tense dinner table turn into poor blood sugar?
Well, to understand the how, we have to look at the body's primary stress response system. It's known as the HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis.
Right.
When a child is living in an environment marked by co-parenting tension or withdrawal, their amygdala, which is the brain's threat detector, is basically constantly firing.
It's on high alert.
Yes. It senses the instability between the parents as a literal survival threat.
Because the brain doesn't know the difference between a physical threat and an emotional threat, right? It just knows something is wrong.
Exactly. The amygdala sends an alarm to the hypothalamus, which signals the pituitary gland, which ultimately tells the adrenal glands to release a flood of stress hormones, primarily cortisol.
Cortisol is the body's built-in alarm system. It's the hormone that gives you the surge of energy to run away from danger.
Yes, the fight-or-flight response.
It increases your heart rate and pumps sugar into your bloodstream so your muscles have immediate fuel to fight or flee.
And that mechanism is beautifully designed for acute, short-term threats. Like if you are running from a predator, you want that glucose in your blood, and you want your immune system's inflammatory response ready to heal a sudden wound.
Sure.
But a competitive, withdrawn co-parenting dynamic isn't a short-term threat. It is a chronic, everyday environment.
So it's the difference between sprinting away from a tiger once versus feeling like there's an invisible tiger pacing in your living room every single day for 7 years.
That's a terrifying way to put it, but yes.
The child's alarm system never fully turns off.
And that chronic activation is where the biological damage occurs. If you are constantly flooding a developing child's body with cortisol, their entire system just gets bathed in it.
It's toxic.
Over time, chronic cortisol exposure leads to widespread systemic inflammation. The body's immune response gets essentially stuck in the on position.
Just attacking healthy tissue.
Right, because it's constantly anticipating a threat that never resolves.
And what about the blood sugar aspect? How does cortisol affect that?
Remember that cortisol's main job during a stress response is to dump glucose into the bloodstream for quick energy.
Oh, right.
So if cortisol levels remain elevated for years due to a stressful home environment, the child's body is constantly producing excess blood sugar.
Which the muscles aren't using because they aren't actually running away from a tiger.
Exactly. So eventually their cells become resistant to the insulin that's trying to manage all that sugar. The pancreas has to work harder and harder, leading directly to the poor blood sugar regulation the researchers measured at age 7.
So the co-parenting dynamic is essentially acting as an invisible physical environment for the child. Just like breathing in bad air quality over time affects your lungs, breathing in a competitive, withdrawn co-parenting environment alters your blood sugar and inflammation levels.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it demonstrates that early family dynamics and psychological stress don't just stay in the mind.
They become physical.
They manifest as measurable physical health markers in the child's biology. The tension between the parents becomes the child's internal biological reality.
Which brings up a massive, honestly, almost confusing point from the data.
The maternal data.
Yeah. If dads have this profound physical effect on the child, logic dictates that moms must have the exact same effect, right? Because it takes two people to create a competitive dynamic.
Well, the researchers naturally assumed they would see identical physiological impacts stemming from the mother's early behaviors.
But they didn't.
They found something entirely unexpected. They did not find these same links between mother's parenting or co-parenting behaviors and these specific child health outcomes.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because that finding completely flips the script on what we normally assume.
It really does.
So why do you think fathers hold this uniquely powerful lever over a child's physical cardiometabolic health, while the mothers in this study didn't show that same link?
It is arguably the most complex nuance in the entire study.
Yeah.
Dr. Diamond is very careful to clarify that this absolutely does not mean mothers aren't vital,
Right. Obviously, moms matter.
or that maternal stress doesn't impact a child in a myriad of other ways. What this exposes is the highly under-recognized contribution of fathers to the family system.
They aren't just backups.
No, fathers are a distinct, critical variable. For a long time, the unstated assumption was that the dad was just a secondary mother.
Like a substitute teacher.
Exactly, offering a diluted version of the same care. But this data proves they introduce a completely distinct regulatory signal to the child's developing nervous system.
So it's not a competition of who matters more. It's that they matter in totally different biological ways.
Yes. One hypothesis is rooted in how families operate socially. Because mothers are often the default baseline of continuous care, a child's nervous system might be uniquely calibrated to variations in the father's engagement.
Oh, that makes so much sense. If maternal care is the constant background hum of the household, a father stepping in to engage or stepping back to withdraw acts as a massive environmental shift.
It stands out more.
Right. The child's nervous system reads the father's level of teamwork with the mother as the ultimate barometer for whether the environment is safe or unstable.
Exactly. The co-parenting quality itself is the trigger. The study highlights that children are impacted not just by how fathers interact with them directly, but specifically by how well the father works alongside the mother.
The teamwork.
Yes. The father's ability to be a cooperative partner in caregiving provides a specific kind of regulatory buffering against the child's stress response.
Mm.
If that buffer is missing, the HPA axis fires up, the cortisol flows, and the cardiometabolic markers decline.
So we have all this incredible longitudinal data. We have 300 families over 7 years.
Mountains of data.
Right. We see infant playtime predicting toddler turf wars. We see those turf wars triggering a child's cortisol response, resulting in measurable blood sugar and inflammation changes at age 7.
Driven uniquely by the father's role.
So what does this all mean? How does this actually change things for the listener or for society at large?
Dr. Diamond lays out the clinical implications with real urgency. The prevailing takeaway is that fathers are not a side story.
They aren't a nice-to-have bonus.
No, they are a necessary consideration that shapes maternal outcomes, parenting capacity, and child development. They are a central, load-bearing pillar of the family's physiological health.
Which means our entire approach to pediatric healthcare needs an overhaul.
Absolutely.
If a 7-year-old shows up at a clinic with systemic inflammation, the pediatrician can't just hand the mother a diet pamphlet and send them on their way.
This raises an important question about how we currently handle family health care. Because treating the child in isolation, or solely focusing on the mother's caregiving, is essentially treating the symptom while ignoring the source.
We're missing the big picture.
The study underscores the need for prevention and intervention programs that actually enhance paternal involvement.
We need to pull dads into the exam room from day one.
Yes, we need programs that explicitly work to strengthen the co-parenting relationship during those grueling toddler years and routinely include both parents in assessment and care. You cannot stabilize the bridge by only reinforcing one pillar.
And for you listening to this deep dive, the implications are deeply personal no matter what stage of life you are in.
Really, it applies to everyone.
Whether you are actively prepping for parenthood or whether you are an adult reflecting on your own childhood environment, this data fundamentally rewrites the script.
It proves that a child's health is shaped by the entire relational system of caregivers surrounding them.
The way parents speak to each other, the way they navigate conflict, that emotional environment becomes the biological foundation of the child's body.
It is a heavy realization, but it shows us exactly where we can intervene early.
Let's briefly recap the journey we took today. We widened our lens to see the entire family system. We tracked the fascinating domino effect from infant play to toddler co-parenting.
And we examined the biological translation of that dynamic, how it keeps the HPA axis in a state of alarm.
Leading all the way to a 7-year-old's blood sugar and inflammation levels, proving the undeniable, unique biological impact of dads.
It's a profound journey from a game of peekaboo to cellular function.
It really is. Now, as we wrap up, I know you had a final thought to leave us with.
I do. I want to leave everyone with a final lingering thought to mull over. This study measured the physical impacts at age 7 based on infant and toddler dynamics. But consider the long game.
Okay.
If inflammation and blood sugar are already impacted by age 7, what happens when these children reach their teenage years or adulthood?
Oh, wait.
Could the invisible roots of chronic adult health conditions be hiding in the way our parents negotiated who read us a bedtime story?
That is a staggering question, and it really changes how you look at human health. Thank you so much to everyone for joining us on this deep dive.
Yes, thank you for listening.